slopes where they had pine Christmas trees, and we always had cedar trees. Not too many of them had a cedar tree in it. And so I thought that would be really neat. But I remember my dad saying they're not really native to this area. They're not going to do any good, you know. But they did better, I guess, really than I thought they would. But I don't think they were native.
No. Well, it's like an old South Carolina forester told me, like it or not, you could drop an atom bomb on a loblolly pine, he'll eventually, you know, survive, you know, and so, you know, it seems like, you know, I've seen where they did some planting in the 60s, and they're scraggly, but they're alive, you know.
Yeah.
And
we never had a beautiful pine forest like you see down in the Carolinas. I've never, or Georgia. I mean, I've never seen that here. Never saw that. Even though it was in a protected area, and it was on land that belonged to the wildlife refuge, and you didn't bother them in any way, so they were allowed to grow as naturally as they could. Never amounted to a whole lot.
Always kind of had a sickly character.
Always kind of had a sickly hue to it. It was never a real healthy, vibrant-looking forest like it was happy and liked where it was. And they talk about burning this area. We never had forest fires when I was growing up. We didn't burn it. We just lived with it. I never remember a forest fire over here of any dimension. That you'd catch the woods on fire, but they always just put them out, you know, burn an acre or two on the ground.
The only place they had major fires was in those pines.
And we had fire towers when we were young that people manned and watched for them, and we were diligent about it. We realized but they were usually set by man. It wasn't usually with a lightning strike like it is out in the west, where lightning storms come up and sets the woods on fire, and you've got a huge, out of control burn. It didn't happen here. I'm not sure what that's all about. But I'll tell you what, I think I've seen the protests of Mother Nature since they've been doing it. We've had Ike come through, blow trees down. We've had an ice storm take trees down. You'd think they would realize that the nature's helping them out if they're trying to destroy it. They're getting a lot of help.
You know, like you were saying earlier, it's like the fire is kind of like this idea of grasslands or whatever. It's just sort of this theory. So they'll have some idea.
When they came here, they did their surveys, and they had their meetings all around. They asked people to come in, and they gave them a piece of paper and a pencil and told them they could write down what they would like this place to look like. If you could dream up land between the lakes, what would your dream be? Well, most of them's dream was sitting under a tree somewhere with the sun shining on their back and the wind in their face, and watching the deer graze and the turkey come by and the coons and the foxes and all that stuff. And so they thought, okay, well, we're going to have to get rid of some of this underbrush, aren't we, if they do that? So they've set about trying to do that and create that image. I don't know how much it's going to cost us taxpayers before they get it done, or how dearly the forest is going to have to pay for it, but I've got a feeling the price is getting pretty high.
So when they started like really pushing, like, you know, these idea of these fire dependent grasslands and oak woodlands and pines, I mean, did they say like they had all this historical evidence to prove it, or?
At one point they did come out with a letter. I believe that an excerpt was taken out of a letter that Mr. David Nichols' great grandfather wrote, and they tried to use that to prove. I don't think they read the whole letter. They kind of took a little piece out of it. David, David could probably get you that information.
Yeah,
remember that letter, David?
Yeah. And what it said was that his grandfather told him that when his father first arrived in the 1780s, that there were a few small openings along the river, and other than that, the whole thing was forested. And they had to clear everything, fields, to be able to build or do anything. It was all forest. Mac Pritchard, who was the Tennessee state naturalist, told me one time, Paul Yambert knew him real well. I was talking to him, and I asked him about this prairie stuff over here, and he said, and I told him they claimed they had found patches of native prairie grasses already here from where it used to be prairie, and he said, yeah, that was right after the last ice age. But since then, it's been forest.
Sagebrush, not prairie grass.
Yeah, broom sage.
Broom sage, yeah.
So that they picked out a little part of the letter, so the little openings,
yeah,
which by a river, you imagine that may have been where
floodplains,
or
it could have been where there were Indian encampments, or
yeah,
something like that. But But according to their archaeologists, there hadn't even been permanent Indian villages here since the woodlands and Mississippian period. So, I think they just came in and they decided. Well, Bill Lazowski told me one time that he managed forests out west and said he preferred prairie over forest. That was the kind of habitat he liked best. So I think he just decided he was going to establish some prairie here. In this oak grassland area where they're committing themselves to just continued heavy maintenance from now on to try to maintain that. Because they've got to burn it constantly. They got to go in and thin it manually. Everything else to keep it opened up, or it'll be just like out here with, you're going to have all the saplings and underbrush in it. And if you clean out the trees, spread them apart, you're going to have vines growing all over everything and briars. And the only way they can keep it from doing that is just continually burn it from now on.
Which keeps a lot of jobs.
Right. Which, what I was about to say is the cheapest thing they can possibly do is leave it alone. Let it manage itself.
It doesn't cost money to grow a tree. Takes a whole lot when you try.
And it doesn't cost any money if you let the natural habitat and the terrain decide what kind of tree ought to grow there.
Exactly.
And it's pretty good at doing that.
Of course, there's this constant draw when you come up with these theories and everything. You do it just because, like you were saying, people just want to be noticed. They want to be remembered. They want to be commended for job well done.
Look how much you got done.
No one gets congratulated just for simply being a watchdog of nature that handles itself.
The idea initially, I think, kind of was to allow it to stay in a natural state.
Yeah.
That didn't include burning it or clear cutting or going in and selective cutting. A natural state would be to allow it to grow a canopy and to choke out in its own time the underbrush that didn't grow there,
right,
and turn to a forest like it could have been. We'll never get there now with all the messing we've had. That'll never happen. That was kind of, I think, the dream that a lot of people had when they left here. Is if we can't live there, maybe we can watch it go back to what it once was and get to enjoy it in that state. They just keep on messing with it.
Well, the original